This is not just about motivation, how to motivate people. We'll talk about that, but it's also about what you need to know is it's not just enough to motivate one person. You have to motivate everybody. One of the things that I thought that was really sort of missing in terms of people's ability to talk to people is nobody talks to you about how do you motivate a group of people, especially people with different styles of motivation. And it really occurred to me that there was a gap there in terms of way to talk to people. So all of you will have a staff of people that you have to motivate, maybe 5 people, or more. And so, or in Katie's case, maybe 3 people. But how do you move them? How do you get that? Maybe you're going to lead a committee of people, and everybody needs a little bit different. And so I thought about it, and this idea of learning how to ride a bike, how people learn to ride a bike, really kind of, and how people are taught how to ride a bike, really seemed to talk to me about how to motivate people. How many of you can ride a bike? I do too. I still ride my bike a fair amount, actually. My wife makes me nervous every time she gets on it. She's wobblier than Joe Biden on it. So
he's pretty sturdy.
Yeah. I know. I love Joe Biden, so he's great. So,
ready for the
yeah. But did somebody teach you how to ride a bike? Yeah. Anybody willing to offer how they were taught? Who taught them? Just a little story.
If I remember right, I know my dad taught me how to ride a bike, but so I started off on a little bike with training wheels, and kind of hold it on the front and back and walk me around, helping me do it. And then finally, I guess I learned how to ride it by myself with the training wheels on it.
Okay.
And then we eventually took the training wheels off.
Okay.
But he still held it and walked me without the training wheels.
Okay.
I was terrified to do it.
You're just feeding into my stuff. So good. Thank you.
Just as I was terrified to drive. So, and then finally I learned how to do it by myself. I fell off several
You crashed?
times. Yes.
Oh yeah, man. Thank you, Katie. You are the right. You are the right person for me to have asked to tell the story. Thank you.
I planned it.
I'll just stop, and that'll be it for the rest of the day. No, we're done. Jordan, could I? I'm asking for your permission. Can I put my hand on you today and use you as an example? I promise I won't do any. I'll put my hand on your shoulder, but I might manipulate your shoulder just a bit. So okay, I just want to give you a head up front. No HR suits later. Okay. So what do I know? Why listen to me? Well, I'm your boss, so that obviously is part of the reason, right? But the truth of the matter is that I've had a lot of people work for me here in my time here. I think I said this yesterday, but yesterday was my 21st. Sort of my 21st year here yesterday. So I've seen a lot of people over the course of that time. And all of you are different in some ways. And then I start to see themes. And to me, as I've thought about motivating, I've learned some things and I've seen some things that seem to be true. And just like I was talking about stages of development, sometimes there's stages of people's ability to be motivated and motivate themselves. Sometimes that comes with experience and confidence. But sometimes it doesn't matter how long you've been with me. Some people, the way I motivate them is the way they're motivated the entire time that they're here. So I want to go through sort of a little bit of that. So you were talking about how did anybody learn by getting shoved one time and took off? Did anybody get that? Kind of? That was kind of my experience. A boy in my neighborhood taught me to ride my bike. I got a bike that was basically a little bit too big for me. And I was really wobbly, but I'd never been on a bike. But he got behind me. He helped me get on the bike, and he helped me go as I took a step and started pedaling. And then he just shoved me, and I was wobbly for sure, but I didn't crash. And it was something about finding that balance that you need to be able to successfully ride a bike, and I got it right away. I was a pretty athletic kid. I know that my current state might defy that, but I was a pretty athletic person, and so figuring that out. You can sit here if you want, Kat. Okay. That was sort of the key to finding some balance, right? And so that was one approach to figure it out. And then Katie, you've got almost all the approaches that I've talked about, but it's there. So I want to take just a moment to talk through sort of the things So, I've given names so you can remember them and little names. So, and I try to give you some visuals, and we'll do some fun things with this. But the first one is here, and ignore the training wheels. It was just the best one I could find for it because training wheels are not necessarily germane to this motivation, though it might work a little bit. There are some people that I've encountered. This is where I'll use you as my prop. They thrive best when you're motivating them with light, constant pressure. It's not shove pressure, okay? But it's light, constant pressure. I don't know why, but some of them just do better with that. When you're there and they know you're there, they thrive. They're able to activate whatever things. You provide them that sense of balance that they need to be able to move. I've had RDs who their entire time here with me is constant pressure. Gentle. Fortunately, I do that pretty well. But gentle pressure. Now, here's the thing. The trick for that is, if you got that, you use your fingertips. If I'm guiding them, if I'm trying to teach them to ride a bike, I use their fingertips lightly to sort of give them. But I push on a little bit, I help their balance. If I ease off a little bit, they come back that way. The same thing applies with people when you're trying to motivate them that need this, is that light pressure, and the way in which you apply that pressure, it gives them direction and it gives them focus and it helps signal things to them. Anybody think you're a light pressure kind of person? There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. Anybody?
I might be, but
You probably might be. Yeah.
maybe hear it
Yeah.
more.
Yeah. Everybody thinks that's wrong. Just because it's this early stage, I put them in an order, and we'll put them in order later for how to move them. But the order of things doesn't necessarily mean any of them are bad. Everybody's going to have a different method of being there. Your team, nobody's going to be. It would be hard to have a team where everybody was the same. In fact, there might be reasons why you would not want that, and we'll talk about that. But these people, what could you think could be the benefit to having a constant pressure person? Anything you think of? They don't go where you don't want them to go. You sort of have some control over how they get a sense of themselves and the balance that they need, and it can be a very powerful sort of relationship dynamic to be able to do that. I mean, if I'm constantly putting pressure, that means we're always there. I'm giving some direction. It can be very fruitful and very successful. It's especially good when you're maybe very brand new. It might not be the worst thing in the world to have somebody who has the ability to provide light, constant pressure on. Now, what could be the drawback to that? And again, they're all got pluses and minuses, but what can you think could be the drawback to somebody who's a constant pressure person? It's sort of in the name. It requires a lot of you, right? I mean, you have to be present in there. And that kind of underscores somewhat the challenge of constant pressure people. If you have a whole organization of constant pressure people, it can be really tough to continue to keep your organization moving. So the next group is what I like to call the babysitters. Now, they're not the actual babysitters. Anybody with a person, you sort of said it when you were talking about this, Katie, when you're talking about your dad, like when your dad would sort of let you go, I'm sure he was right there by you, but you were terrified, right?
Yeah.
This is the babysitters. That's those people. It's these people who they can ride the bike, but there's something that just doesn't want them to do it on their own. There's a fear. There's the same thing for these people. These people know how to ride the bike. They could go, but they can't seem to be able to energize that for themselves. They're fine as long as I'm standing right beside them. But when I move away from them, sometimes fear sort of comes in, paralyzation happens. They don't move sometimes. What could be an advantage of a person who's a babysitter? They know how to ride the bike. They just don't believe they know how to ride the bike. I'll ask a question a little bit later, and this might be the answer to that question. What could be a negative about babysitters?
Ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, if in the bike setting, in the actual setting, there are people who are going to ask a lot of questions. I don't know if that's a negative, but they're going to need lots of verbal attention, and they're going to need a level of attention. I mean, you're going to have to keep them pretty close to you. So there are limits to how far away they're going to get from you. You know, you can't send them too far ahead, right? If your dad had pushed you far ahead or let you get you too far ahead, what would have happened probably? You would have panicked. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I see this. I've seen this a lot. I see this a lot. That this is the and in some ways, I think this is the trickiest person to motivate because there's such potential for them to become something else, but it requires a lot of you as a leader to be able to get that to happen. And so there's some really good things. I mean, I think tactically, having some babysitters in your organization might make you be more successful as a leader in some ways, or be able to keep your group together. But individually, they can be really challenging to sort of have to work with because they require a lot of attention. Crash and burn. That's why I asked the question: did anybody just get shoved forward and start riding the bike? Because that would interesting. Telemarketers. The warranty on your car is given up. It's funny because I have a lease, so I don't think my warranty's up on it. Crash and burn. The crash and burn people that I've encountered, they're like super gung ho and eager to do it, and they think they can ride the bike. So you got it. What they need is they need a little bit of help getting started, is what I've noticed. That they need that. So they're the people that are very ripe for a shove. But here's what happens. They ride for a bit until they realize they're riding, and then they crash. It's like, oh, I'm riding. Crash and burn are often one of the most morally challenging kinds of people to work with as a leader. Why do you think that? They do, but also they're going to crash, and so you have to be okay with the crash. Does that make sense? I mean, I motivated people where they needed that shove. I knew they were going to crash, and I knew they were. I didn't really know how far they might get, but I had a pretty good idea that they were going to crash, and I had a feeling that they might get a little damaged or hurt by that, right? You have to decide, are you okay with that? Now, what might be a good thing about a crash and burn? Yeah? What are they missing from being able to ride the bike?
Pressure or like somebody there for them. They just need that initial push.
No, they're going to crash. So they're going to crash. They don't need necessarily that push, but they are going to crash. What's good? What do you think? Good try, but think about it. Let's think about it, and I don't mean that in a patronizing way. No. What could be good about them?
I think they're like willing to try new things or try.
This. And again, go back to the question: what is it that they're missing from success to make them successful? What's the difference between somebody who can ride a bike and somebody who crashes and burns? Why do they crash and burn?
I don't know how to stop or when to stop or steer.
Or how to put your feet down. The difference between a put your feet down person and a crash and burn is that they don't have the ability to see the need to put their feet down. You ever take that into motivating somebody? Have you ever pushed somebody forward and their problem is that they don't know how to stabilize themselves, right? They don't know how to prevent the crash. The problem with crash and burn is that they're going to crash. Now, if you're leading a big organization with a bunch of people, what's the problem with crash and burn? You're going to have to pick them up and dust them off. But the positive thing about them is in the moment that they're riding, that they're able to move forward, you don't have to attend to them, but you do have to be ready that they're going to crash. Now, let's think really hard about your experiences working with RAs, working with other people. Have you ever met a crash and burn RA? They're fine. You push them, they go, and they're doing great for about the first 2 months, and then all of a sudden, boom, they're a wreck. and you're coming up alongside them as the RD. Oh, all right. You're crashing a crumpled heap. They're crying. They're bloody. They got dirt on them. Maybe they got a little bit of gravel in them. Their bike's kind of wonky. You know, the challenge with them is that it can be a lot to get them back up and going. The thing that happens sometimes, what happens with crash and burn? What do they become sometimes if you don't deal with it right? They become these people. They become the constant pressure people. They revert back. They revert back to that person that needs constant pressure because they lost their mojo. You know what I mean? They're afraid to move forward. They don't want to take a step without you telling them it's okay and affirming to them. Like I said, this is some of the hardest, most morally challenging people for you ethically. You know, do I let people crash and burn? The question is, would it be better to let them be constant pressure people until they, you know, instead? I kind of don't think so. I think that, look, anybody crash once and never crash again? When you were learning to ride a bike?
On the bike?
Yeah,
Like
or as an RD or as an RA.
Okay. Um,
In certain areas, yeah.
I think that's the risk here, risk reward sort of here. You know, we were talking about skating the other day, and I know I don't want to fall skating, right? Because I know what it'll do for my body if I fall. If I was going to go skating, I had one or two choices: don't fall or don't skate, right? You know, I would be highly motivated not to fall because I don't want to fall. I don't like falling, right? I don't want to crash and burn, right? The thing is if you don't crash and burn anymore, what are you? You know how to ride a bike. You know how to ride a bike. We might talk a lot about this because these are a very interesting group of people. Kind of fraught with opportunity and danger. And I said it the way I meant it. The next group of people is what I call the put your feet down people. Most of these people, they need a little shove. But basically, they get the idea that they know how to ride the bike. Their problem is, and you know, think back to your time of learning to ride a bike, right? You ride a bike, you're excited about it, or maybe you're learning to drive a car. You're thinking about everything, right? Now that you drive a car, do you think about everything that you're going to? Half the time, I'm not sure how I got from Bellevue to Belmont sometimes, right? I'm like, I listened to three chapters in my audiobook and I don't even remember anything that was said. That was like me watching Loki yesterday. I don't know. I watched it and I can't really even remember anything because I was so engrossed in other things. No indictment on the episode. It was a good episode. I was just really tired. Sometimes that's what happens though, is when you're learning how to do something, you're focusing on learning doing the things. Is the steering right? Am I pedaling right? Oh, is my foot caught up in the chain? You know, what about these gears? You know, the seat's really high and I can't touch my feet. Oh, wait, look, there's a squirrel running across in front of me about 5 miles away, but I don't want to hit him. You know, grass, I'm moving to grass. So instead of the sidewalk, people, they get fixated on everything but the thing that's the most important thing, which is keep pedaling. And if you start to find yourself falling, put your feet down. These people have it figured out. They know how to ride a bike. They don't have the ability to put their feet down to keep them from crashing. So they do. What's sort of the reaction to people like that? What do they do? They either keep pedaling and they pedal harder to keep from falling, or they crash. But these people are easy to fix. You just tell them to put your feet down when they start to look wobbly. Now, what's the challenge for that if they're in front of you?
to stop with.
You have to pay attention to what's going on in front of you. You have to pay attention to what's going on. If they look wobbly and they're about to crash, or or if they're going to speed up and get too far away from you, you have to pay attention to them. You have to keep your eye. They're better in front of you than beside you. They're better than behind you. You know what I mean? They're better if you're in front of you. Now, what's good about put your feet down, people, you think? They can ride the bike. They can ride the bike.
Another limit, maybe.
They don't know their limit. You're right. Sometimes they don't. You're right. That's a very good point. They don't know their limit. They don't know their limit. They're not always scared of falling. They're not thinking about that at all, if that makes any sense. They're not really scared of falling. They're too busy thinking about everything that's going on right now. I think one of the best things about them is that they'll take instruction. I think that's a good thing about them. They'll take instruction, and they can ride the bike. The challenge with them is they require your attention. And it's sometimes hard to know what's going on with them. Right? They've got so much going on in their head, it's sometimes hard to articulate. So if you're trying to figure out how to keep them motivated or whatever, they're talking about all these other issues when what you really need to talk about is how to learn to put your feet down. And they're thinking about all the other things, the mechanics. The funny thing is that they basically have got all the other stuff down. It's just the one missing piece. I like them because I think they can be turned into better people quicker. And to be brutally honest, they can become these people pretty simply with the right thing. I also think they're the most versatile group of people in the way you order your group of people. Okay, the last group is called the stop and goes. And we know these people. We've seen them. Some of you are these people or were these kinds of people. You guys can ride the bike. You can ride it really well. Yeah, you might need a little shove to get going. The danger in these people is they ride the bike so well, they don't know when to stop. And they can get away from you very quickly and out of sight. And if they run into trouble, you don't have any ability to help them. They just off and running. They might take a turn and go down a place you don't want to go sometimes. This is the challenge of them as a part of a group that's sort of leading them. They ride the bike really well, but they need to be told where to stop. I like to tell people like this, when I have somebody like this, I like to tell them, I want you to ride to 5th Street and I want you to stop. Why do you think that's important? Why not just let them run until you go? They might go too fast. They might go out too hard, right? You're trying to move your whole organization, and you can't. If things happen and it starts raining and they're so far ahead of you, you can't reel them back in because they're too far away, right? You need to be part of the peloton, you know what I mean, from a cycling sort of perspective, right? And I'm not talking about the exercise bike. It's the peloton's the big pack, and it's pretty spread out, but it's the big pack. Everybody knows where the peloton is. There is some safety in the peloton, if you will, being part of that pack. Again, sort of the example would be if it starts raining and lightning, they may be out there by themselves. If they have a flat tire, or they might go another direction that you don't want them to go to. This is a group of people that I see a lot. They ride the bike well, or at least they think they ride the bike well. Sometimes they think they're stop and goes when they're really put your feet down people. But they want to be that. What could be good about stop and goes?
They don't need somebody to
Yeah.
kind of be there, really.
You kind of set them and let them go, which frees you up, right? If I say to Jordan, hey, I want you to stop on 5th Avenue and wait for us if we're not there behind you, great. What's also, I think, good about people like that is they often can tell you what's ahead because they're out front. They're great scouts for where we're going. So if I send her ahead and I'm trying to bring the group and she's there, but she's waiting, she can tell me, what she's seen. She can tell me what we've experienced. She could tell me what, maybe she sees what's ahead of us first, right? And so sometimes that can be very good. I think they offer a lot of opportunities to help lead a bigger group. help you with you have more people than this, than just. Okay, so let's talk about dynamics of like. So I said to you, the challenge is getting everybody to move at the same time. And there are wrong answers here, but there are multiple right answers here too. But just thinking about it, sort of what we've talked about, what what would be the right order to send people off in? Who would you motivate first?
Just stop and go.
Yeah. So how would we motivate them? We might give them instructions. We might tell them the destination. We would tell them that's part of how you motivate them is you give them a sense of the plan. I think people like that, if you tell them what you're trying to do, where you're trying to go, it gives them a sense to move toward. I think people like that can thrive very good. You might spend some time talking to them about the what ifs. What if it starts to rain, right? Well, whatever the version of that is and where you're trying to go. What if things help them prepare? You want to give them contingencies so that they know, so they're able to do that. Who else might you? Who else? Who would be number two?
Shouldn't hurt maybe.
Yeah, I could agree with that. Why?
It's kind of just to that initial push, and just like, hey, this is where you're gonna go, and they kind of know where they're going for the most part, and you can give them a destination.
Yeah.
And they might not make it there.
Probably
but,
not going to make it
you
there.
know, but you can at least push them and get them going.
So, what do you need to remember about them? They're going to crash. You have to be okay with the crash. You might give them some instructions if something happens, if they crash. Life saving. In case of an emergency, here's what you need to do, right? I think yes. I think this they require, after these people, they require the least amount of attention immediately to get started. Now, there's a trick that you could do with your stop and goes. Anything you can think of?
Send them off with crash and burn people so they can stop and help them when they
And pick them
crash.
up. Yes, very good. Yeah. That's advanced motivation right there. Tell them that you don't want them, where their job to go is to stay with the crash and burn. Who's next, you think? Why? Yeah. You're right. They're better in front of you. To some degree, they act a lot like stop and go, but you can't just send them alone. You're going to have to keep an eye on them, right? So you don't want to send them off too soon without you, but you don't want to send them after you got everything else moving. They're the middle child, right? I mean, typical. Is there a strategy you could think that could utilize stop and goes with them? You could. I think you could use stop and goes as somebody to be the person that tells them to put your feet down. You could have them riding with, because again, remember, they know how to ride the bike. They're just obsessed with the details of riding a bike, right? Here's the thing. The more they ride the bike, the better their confidence is. Right? I remember when I was learning to ride a motorcycle, it was really hard because I was focusing on all the other things about that. The clutch, the other thing. And I almost wiped out the instructor one day because it was really hot. And we were just riding around in ovals, and it was like 110 degrees outside, and you're wearing a helmet and a jacket and pants, and you're on a hot motorcycle too. And we were just circling and circling. And it was toward the end of the day, and I just sort of lost my focus for just a minute. And I was headed for the entire class that was still standing there, including the instructor. And at the last second, I did all the things that they trained me to do and kept us from wiping out the class. Okay, that happens sometimes. But part of what happened was the training that I got, the instructions I had kicked in when I needed it, thankfully. And it only took just a moment of distraction before I was veering off in the wrong way. But my instructor was really proud. He said, I might just pass you just for that reason alone. Now, if you'd wiped out the class, I probably would have had to fail you. So I did pass it. But it's just so easy sometimes. So sometimes the stop and go can be a person that can be helpful in a lot of ways for that. But these people could also be lined up in a lot of different places. Could you put your feet down with your crash and burns too? Yes. The problem with it is what you once they crash and burn, that's as far as your put your feet down people will go sometimes. Could you pair your put your feet down people with your babysitters? Yes. Could you pair them with your constant pressure people too? Yes, because they can ride the bike. They can ride your bike. What might be an instance where having maybe let's say you have one or two put you down feet people, what would you do? When would it be okay to use them in these places to help you? When you've got a lot of people, sometimes having somebody who's back further, closer to help sort of manage that, helping keep other people motivated, keeping an eye on it, sort of a surrogate shepherd, if you will, to keep you going. Who else? What would be next?
Babysitters.
Yeah, tell me why.
They don't require constant pressure. You can have more faith in their ability.
Yeah.
You just have to be encouraging.
Yeah. You do have to keep a little bit of an eye on them, right? Here's the funny thing about babysitters. You don't have to actually watch them, but they have to think that you're watching them. Right? How many of us had a babysitter who was talking to their boyfriend or girlfriend there, and right? Instead of paying, but you thought they were watching you, right? Yeah. I mean, and the reality is Jordan was watching them. But yes, the challenge with babysitters is that they do have to have the feeling that they're being watched. That it's more psychological than it is actual physical that they need, right? They have a implied constant pressure on them as opposed to an actual constant pressure on them, right? That's what makes them work. Okay, and then of course 5, right? Anybody see any order you could do differently? Assuming that you had one of each. You can sometimes reverse these two. How about a radical idea? Could you make your stop and go 5? How might you make that happen? And tell them, hey, come up the rear, make sure nobody crashes, right? Hey, when we meet, hey, when you catch up to us, if you get ahead of us, stop. Or, hey, once you get to us, keep pedaling beside these. I mean, yeah, you could make, there could be a case to be made that they could be 5. The challenges here and here sometimes is that a lot of these people need a little push to get started. Even though they know how. These need a lot of push, these need a little push. What is it about these people that the push is? What if we're talking about in motivation or just what is it? What's going to cause them to crash? Yeah, and a lack of balance, a lack of sort of that. I mean, they get wobbly at some point. These people are funny because I've noticed them is that the harder you push them, the longer they can go. The harder the first push is. They start running into problems when they get into obstacles that slow down their rate of movement. So that's the same thing when they're working on a project or they're having something running and going. When they run into obstacles they get into grass, let's say, not everything's a nice easy sidewalk, right? They start to lose their speed, and that's when they're the most vulnerable to crashing. So the harder you can shove them, right, the quicker their momentum gets up and their balance happens, and they can maybe go further. These people, they don't need a huge shove. Where do these people get into trouble? Not just simply, what causes them to get into trouble, you think, sometimes? They got the basic mechanics of riding the bike or motivation or how to do the things right, but they don't deal well with like obstacles that aren't part of the bike. Does that make any sense? They don't deal well with, hey, I'm going over a curve and it's got a steep drop off. Oh, hey, there's a storm grate on it. And they freak out about the things that are ahead of them, putting their attention on what's ahead of them that's unexpected and what's not. So if I'm talking about that for helping motivate people and prepare people, what could I do to help somebody? I think if you can map out the course for them a little bit ahead, tell them what to expect, where those are going to be some obstacles, it takes some of the anxiety out of that kind of thing. And so if you know the road ahead, sometimes you don't, right? Sometimes we're on virgin territory, but sometimes if you know the route that you're running and that they're going to encounter, you might be able to say to them, hey, now when you get to 3rd Avenue, you're going to come off the curb really hard because it's a steep drop off, and you're going to go over a sewer gate. Great. Go around the grate instead of going through it. Okay. Then they have an answer to that right away. So when you have people that you're motivating and they're this kind of person and they have challenge, they're going to encounter challenges, give them the solution to the challenge so they don't spend their time thinking about that challenge as much as just executing it. Does that make sense for people? Okay. All right, so let's make it messy because this is all nice and neat. Let's have some fun. Let's add some people to it. Because why? Let's see. How many? You have 11 on the staff and Patton, right? I don't know if I want to.
Some years 12.
Yeah. So let's add some more people onto this. This is why I got all these. Trying to decide who I want to add. Oh yeah. I got a few surprises for us too. Everybody following what I'm talking about right now? It's gonna mess up all my pretty handwriting, but that's okay. And here, this case, there aren't really necessarily any right answers here because we're adding a lot of complexity to it. Thanks. They're not together, not conjoined constant pressure people. All right, so look at this one. So now we went from 5 to 9 people. See any challenges of that? How do you move 9 people that diverse? We can make it even more, right?
A lot of grouping.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the constant pressure people, what is that immediately? What stands out to you? 3. How many hands do you have? 2. How do you multiply that? Yeah. There is a sort of a technique too, right? I found that this works. Is get them all close together, keep them tight together, and constantly go back and forth. That constant pressure people, their orbit doesn't falter. Sorry, Brent, I didn't ask you for information, but if I give them a little pressure and I move over and I got them keep going, and I come back over to Jordan, and I give her a little pressure and I keep her moving, and if I can kind of maintain that contact enough, and if you tell them ahead of time, they'll keep going. They'll keep going. It is dangerous. It is dangerous. Right? Is there a strategy that you could do right now that would help you with that? With the people that you have, besides doing the 3? Let's assume they had 4, maybe even of those. Anything you could do on this? Oops, not have the tape fall. There is. Here's a thought. Take your stop and go. Ask them to walk with you. Put pressure on these people. And we've got the crappiest.
Babysitter.
Yeah, we need a babysitter. Thinking about how we're organized, how do we do that? How are we doing that? Correct. Assistant directors to some degree. With 2 babysitters, do you have to do anything really different?
No,
Not really.
I think you're there. So.
That's what's great about babysitters, right? There's a limit to babysitters. They ain't going anywhere unless you're going there. But guess what? It's almost limitless to how many babysitters you can put in your group, because they just need to be near you, right? They just get that reassurance. The challenge is it limits how quickly you can move your organization forward, though. What do you think is the biggest, outside of you and your ability to put your hand on constant pressure people, what do you think is the other biggest obstacle to pushing, how far you can push an organization or motivate them? Which one's what's the biggest obstacle in this equation? I think so. Why do you think that, Lauren? That's a good answer.
Well, first of all, crash and burn at different areas.
Yes.
Have pick up 2 people, and they can have different reactions to it. Like one might get back without much help from you, get back on the bike, and one might be too scared to get back.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
You got 4 constant pressure people.
Yeah.
Just, like other people can be affected by watching the people crash.
Oh, yeah.
It's still more fear.
Yeah. I mean, these people start freaking out if everybody's crashing in front of them, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what's up in front of them? Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, that's the inherent danger of sending them second ahead of these people, right? Cost benefit analysis, right? I mean, what the benefit? There are benefits to sending them ahead. There are also some potential dangers there. Yeah, crash and burn, I think, are critically probably the most difficult toward your success. I mean, they can be, but it's there's opportunity in them too. But here's what it looks like when you've got a bunch of crash and burns.
The constant pressure was too much.
Yeah.
They were tired of being stopped. They had to go.
That's what happens. The other challenge with crash and burns, crash and burns don't stop. They stand up there. The other challenge with crash and burn is what can happen is 2 things. Is it draws your attention away from the people ahead of you too. And sometimes these people can get away from you. Especially this person, you could find yourself with another crash and burn here if you're spending too much energy and time doing it. So let's talk about how do you deal with a crash and burn? What would be some strategies for a crash and burn? How to move them? What you want them to do is you really want them to go from this to this. If not that, this. I mean, if you had your choice, you want them to go to this. The thing about them is that they really, really do know how to ride the bike. They really do. Both of these people do. These people need to get out of their head. These people need to get in their head a little more. Right? They need to think about the process. these people need here's what gets these people moving forward. It's the shove, right? The shove is a very taxing thing. It takes a lot of energy. Not as much as them crashing, but it does take a lot, right? It takes resources. You've got to, it's not the same as giving a little shove. It's a big shove that you got to get them to. So you have to give them the ability to create momentum on their own. How do you do that with people that are, how do we teach people how to create their own energy to move forward?
Maybe guide them a little bit further than you initially anticipated to, instead of just giving them one shove at the beginning, kind of giving them a shove here and a shove there.
Yeah, a strategy when you're with crash and burns alone, or maybe with a group of crash and burns, is to walk alongside them. When they get ready to crash, you put your hand on them to steady them. You walk beside them. The other thing, this is going to sound silly. Let's just pretend that in teaching people how to ride a bike, you have a bike simulator, okay, that they can get on and they can feel the motion of that without the fear of crashing. People can learn how to get that sense of balance. They can get their sense of velocity that they need to do, the pacing that they need to be able to keep, if they can practice. Practice makes people more successful in this.
Crash and burn people, did you give them like checkpoints and say like when you get here, check back in with me?
Yeah, or stop. Yeah.
Give them another shove.
Yeah.
So you force them to be.
Yeah, I mean, if you can get them that far,
Okay.
right? If you think you can get them to a checkpoint, that's a good strategy. Absolutely, it's a good strategy to yeah. This is going to be a silly strategy. You may think it's sort of weird, but this is sometimes the way you get both people to figure out. Sometimes, if you're working with crash and burns, put your feet down people to get off their bike, walk beside the crash and burn people, and they get the insight as to what causes watching somebody else crash. Right? Or they might be able to tell them, "Hey, you're about ready to crash. Put your foot down." There's something about letting other people teach the thing that you're trying to get them to learn. Does that make any sense? So if I want Lauren to learn to put her feet down, I might tell her to work with Zach on not crashing. Absolutely. What is it if you're the leader, okay, and you're the person leading this group? What do you need to think about in terms of what your destination is, what you're trying to achieve, how quickly are you going to get there? And what's it going to take from you? Just evaluating this group. Let's assume that our I think a couple things you could take from this. You're not going to go super far. I mean, you know what I mean? You're not going to be able to run warp speed ahead. Not with this configuration. If I was trying to make a distance, but maybe not realizing that here's the thing about this thing. Your organization is going to get there at the same time, roughly. This way. Let's think about this same groups of people, right? Till they fall off. If I wanted to make some distance, but I was okay with the idea that my organization may not get there all at the same time, what could I do here? Could I do anything differently that could cover ground, but would not get the whole organization there? Yeah, send the stop and go. Maybe even ask them to ride with the put your feet down people.
Yeah.
Right? How could I get the most maximum number of people? Yeah, as I could. I go, 2, 3, 4, you know. I'd send these two people together, and I'd send this one as many times as I could, knowing that this is going to be the stopping point. That everybody from this point forward is only going to go as far as these people go. Is that okay sometimes? Yeah, sometimes. What's crucial here? What's crucial here in this case? It's establishing the set point very clearly. It's understanding where you want them to go, what you want to do if they encounter problems, what you want them to do when they get there. How many times have you worked for a place where they send out everybody all the really gifted people out way far trying to make ground, only find a huge gap in an organization in the places where they are? It's one thing when you have that gap because you've got a lot of inexperience, right? It's one of the most difficult things for me is figuring out how to get people like Jess and Taylor and Kat to get to the places where they want to be without holding them back, but also causing my organization to have a big gap in between it. How do I do that? How do we do that? I have found that one of the most effective things is finding ways to use people like this to help move your organization. It's a choice that I've made, but I would rather our organization move more collectively together than far away from me. It's not, either one is not wrong, but they do come with some things that you have to deal with. So let's take these down for just a second. Pretend these are not here. Because some of you got brand new staff, right? A whole brand new. All these people are brand new. Anything that you could do here? What would be the best strategy here? Any thought? You really just have to walk beside these people. Is that ever true for anybody? Those of you who've had just a brand new staff, what's happened for you? How have you chosen to lead them? You've had to walk beside them the entire year. You have to walk with them. You have to be involved in their life. You have to be connected to what they're doing. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's a choice that you're going to have to recognize that's sort of been made by the people that you have here. Let's say, though, that I want to push my group further. If I wanted to make them be better, what could I do? What could be good evolution? Any opportunities here? I think so. I think the goal maybe would be to take these people to this or to this. If I were shooting for something here, I'd try to get these people to become this. Here's what happens when you don't have constant pressure people. Guess what you can do? You can ride the bike too. You can travel a lot more when people are not constant pressure people, when you're not loaded down with constant pressure people. You can travel faster, further. You can ride your own bike a little bit. The challenge for this, and it's a good thing, a lot of people are fulfilled by this sort of thing, right? But this is hard to sustain over a long period of time. You might be okay with this for a year, but if you don't move these people to something else, Darian or Kat or Jess, have you ever had a staff where they were newbies the first year, you moved them into some of these other categories, freed up your need to give that kind of constant pressure? How much better could your organization run and move? Lots, right? So if you're a brand new RD and you're got a lot of brand new RAs that are all needing your attention or babysitting on them, your goal is to graduate everybody up to the next level. And I told you that none of them are bad, but for the thing I would want you to take away from this is, one, to understand the different ways that people can be motivated, how they move, how you get them to move. And then the dynamics of where people are can be a tremendous influencer on the approaches and the tactics that you take to move your group forward. Let's think again. So let's change this up. And let's say that everybody here, it's all these. You've got 4, let's say in Hale, you've got 3 of these. You don't, but How would you do there?
You got 3 of these people?
Yeah, 3 of them. All 3 of them. All stop and goes.
I mean, you really can send them out to do different things, but you still have to keep an eye on them.
You can ride beside them a lot easier. In fact, you probably should. And you might get out in front of them. Because why? Because if you're out in front of them, they don't get away from you. The danger of these people, having all these people, is that they get too far out ahead of you. So you want to ride ahead of them in this case. You don't have to worry because you don't have anybody that you need to keep up with. You see how I think you maybe came in here thinking I was going to, well, you weren't coming in, you think I was going to talk about difficult conversations, but but after you got past that, you probably came in and thought, I'm going to tell you one way to motivate people. And I'm telling you how people are motivated, what they need, and then how many different configurations it can be based on the kinds of people that you have. Let's see, Jordan, I don't know if you know, do you know everybody, you know all your staff that you've hired for next year? If you're going to guess, without having to use their names, what do you think you've got? Because you've got a more mature staff.
Yeah. I would say I probably have 1 stop and go. Probably 2 put your feet down. 1 babysitter.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Not surprising.
No. One crash and burn.
Okay.
And then 1. That's all.
So you got a little bit of everything.
Mm-hmm.
So that sort of the more traditional sort of try to put the people in front of you approach probably makes the most sense, right? What should your goals be? Should you have these really ambitious, far-reaching goals for the Commons next year probably with that staff? Probably not. You can cover some ground. But I think, you're going to have some clear limiters for people, right? You're going to have some clear places where this is the stopping points. This is where we're going to check in points. Madison, thinking about your staff, what do you got? No names.
I have 1 stop and go and 1 put your feet down, and 2 babysitters and 1 constant pressure.
Okay. So there are some good things about that, right? If I had to choose where I would put my priority in, what would it be? Which one would you put your priority in, you think?
Maybe the babysitter.
No, I'd probably put my in constant pressure. You know why? Because the minute they become a babysitter or more, you can ride the bike now.
That's a good point.
You don't have a crash and burn.
Not yet.
But crash and burn's still okay if you don't have any constant pressures. This is why babysitters are great. I mean, they'll be with you. They'll stay with you. I mean, you've seen them. You've seen what they look like. I see that already all the time. It's just, they hang on every word that you have to say. They think you're Jesus, offering the sermon. You know what I mean? It's like they're the apostle, I mean, they want to be around you. They want to learn from it. It's a great thing. It's also a dangerous thing when it talks about that's where you get addicted to mattering, is when you have too many of those kinds of RAs. But they're good to do that. They want to listen to you. They want to follow what you're doing. They want to eat what you're cooking. Take whatever metaphor you want. They can be good. The thing, these are constant pressure RAs, constant pressure employees are some of the people that give you the most fulfillment and joy in your life. You have a deep connection to those people because you've got your hand on them. It can be tempting. It's like a parent who that loves babies. It can be very tempting to not want to make them grow up. This is psychological. You can fix this. This is a need that has to be overcome in order for them to become any of the other things. You can't go from here. You can go to any of the others from this point, but you can't. To stay there is almost impossible. You will, if you have ambitious goals, this is the person that, these are the people you've got to sort of wean off of that as quickly as possible. So what strategies to take people from this to this, or to any one of these? How do you get people from there? What would that look like?
You can kind of, instead of pushing them from behind, maybe pushing them from the side, or kind of
Mhm.
like directing them.
Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. Instead of putting your hand on them, you come to the bike, right? And you're pulling them in essence more than you are. Sometimes the RAs need to be pulled, sometimes to become more, sometimes, right? Sometimes you can't stand right beside them to do that. I mean, we've talked about it before. If you've got somebody who's further along, take them off the bike, put them beside them, help you move those people. Okay, here's a little secret. I have to deny this if I've been brought before Congress about this. Okay. Sometimes the best way to get a constant pressure person off of being constant pressure is to push them a little harder than they want. It might cause them to do this, crash and burn. What did I say? Nobody likes to crash. Nobody likes to crash. That might be enough. It's a risk. You're going to have to come clean it up later. Wipe the blood off, get the dirt off, stand them back up, get them going. But sometimes a little extra pressure, a little extra shove, a little extra heart will make the difference. Don't do it day one, right? The other tactic is this: distraction. Jordan, you're doing really great. Jordan, I can't believe you're doing it. You're riding yourself. Jordan, look at you. You're riding yourself. Jordan, you're riding. You've done it. Get it? She's focused on your excitement and your energy for their success, not the fact that you're not putting your hand on them. That sometimes means getting out in front. It sort of means building them up in ways that maybe, maybe are disproportionate to the moment, right? Have we ever done that to any RD before? Yes, many, many times. What did I tell you? Sugar is a little bit of a distraction. I've given you all my secrets away. Now you're going to know what I'm doing to you. Because guess what? I do the same things to you all. So sometimes sugar can detract from the need for constant pressure. Now, sometimes it might hype them up and cause them to crash or burn, but that's okay, Any other thoughts about how do you move somebody who's a constant pressure person? Yes, please, Lauren.
Like as a coach, I take a back handspring, for example, and use body first with two hands and then one hand. Then I tell them like, hey, 3 fingers this time, and 2, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden they're doing it by themselves, and then they realize that
Yeah.
they can.
Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. So instead for Jordan, it's okay here. Now it's just 2. Maybe it's 1. Hey Jordan, look, you're doing it. I'm barely touching you. You're doing this. The other thing that I've done sometimes with people like this is I create their own pressure. How might I do that? You give them goals, you give them objectives that you think they can reasonably meet. You give them expectations and you put the pressure on them to meet them. Sometimes people respond to that. So I say to Jordan, here's the thing. In 2 months, I need you to be ready to do this. And I need you to be ready to do this on your own. So I give people opportunities to lead other people. Sometimes that's the thing that gets people past that sometimes. I say, hey, Kat, I'm going to put you in charge of RD training. That's not fair because Kat's not a constant pressure person, but the Kat's the absolute opposite of constant pressure. So Kat's like, I don't want any pressure on me at all like that. Don't touch me. No. She wants to roll. No. Um, but sometimes the way to do that is to put the pressure to meet a performance, to give them a chance to have to be responsible to other people. I think sometimes the constant pressure way, so we've got 3. Let's say I had 4. What could I do that could solve that problem right away? I could take one of these and tell them to get off your bike. How many times have you told how many times have you assigned an RA who's having a problem to another RA who has a problem to fix their problem, help them fix their problem? Lots. Or if you haven't, you will. Let's see. Any questions anybody has? Any things, comments you want, or scenarios that you see that you wonder about how you would handle them?
I really like these analogies. It makes me think about my RAs in the past that I've had and
Uh-huh.
like what I should have done differently with them. So it's been like
Good. I'm glad. That means a lot to me. I'm trying to give you things that make it easier for you to have a way of thinking and talking about it, even if it's just to yourself. I mean, you know that the first time you see a crash and burn, you're going to know it. It's going to come. You're like, oh, Anthony, yeah, that's a crash and burn, or oh, this is totally a babysitter, or this is totally a constant pressure person. I mean, that's what I like about things like strengths and Enneagram. I like
Since we're
is that they, yeah, but it gives people a way to talk about themselves. It gives you a way to talk about your RAs or your staff or the way you supervise people. It's really important to me to. So that we have a parlance too, right? So when you come to me or you come to Darian and you, hey Darian, hey, I got a babysitter. What do you think? I need to do, and we all know what that means, right? Yeah, absolutely.
Have you found good with, like, say you have a crash and burn, you know they're gonna crash, but it is crucially vital that they do not crash in this one part of the course,
Yeah.
or whatever. How do you deal with that?
Well, crash and burns are funny because if I really truly believe that somebody can't crash and burn in a place like this, the best answer that I don't have other people to work with them. The better answer is to keep them close enough to basically, in essence, turn them into a constant pressure person, so that I can continue to move my organization through this space, but I can keep them from crashing and burning. Because look, if you're a bike rider and you're in a crash and burn, and I put my hand on and I steady you, you're not going to crash. So look, let's talk about micromanagement for just a minute, because everybody talks about that like it's a dirty word, right? So I'm going to tell you a story about me so that this will help you. My uncle was one of these people that believed that you throw a little kid into the deep end of the pool and they swim or they don't. And I was terrified because of that, of water. I mean, I was terrified to swim. I love to swim, but I was terrified to do that. So we were at a beach one time, and I was a good swimmer, but I wasn't. I could swim like many little kids that don't really know how to swim. I could swim as long as I could hold my breath, that length, and as long as it was there, if I could swim to the other side of the pool, I could be safe. As long as I could get to a place where I could either grab down or put my feet down. So I was swimming, and I'd swim out this lake, and I'd swim out to this like diving platform or jumping platform. I swam out there, and I did it all fine. It was pretty far, but I did it all in one breath. And I decided I was going to swim back. And I was swimming back. And the swim out there probably took a little more out of me than I realized. And I just started running out of gas. And I really was worried that I was not close enough, but I thought maybe I was. And so I stopped swimming. First mistake. I put my feet down. And I put my feet down, and the water was about here on me. It was over my mouth and nose. I could just see it. I was tantalizingly close to being able to do that. But honestly, I was drowning. I was drowning. It was just deep enough for me to not be able to. I was exhausted from the thing. I was going to drown. Now I was amidst a bunch of other people, and this is how drownings happen in real life too. I'm not. This is how. I mean, this is what happens, right? I was fortunate enough that there was an older boy who was playing with some other boys around there, and he saw me struggling. And this is all he did. He came by me and he pushed me about 1.5 feet. And it moved me forward enough to where I could put my feet down and pop back up and be out of the water. Now, let's be honest. I could have saved myself one way. What would that have been? Pardon? Don't stop swimming. Absolutely. The other thing is, if let's say I did run out of gas and I didn't, if I let myself sink to the bottom, I could have touched the bottom and popped back up enough to pop back out and get another breath and enough breath to keep swimming. Micromanaging is sometimes like that. Sometimes it's just the little shove that you need to go a little further. He could have also pushed me down and let me realize I was down on the bottom. I was panicked because, I realized that it was just, the problem was it was so close, almost, right? I think if it had been over my head still, I might have realized I could have just dropped down, put on the bottom and pushed back up and got going. But it was because I was so tantalizing close and I knew it. Most of us, when somebody's struggling, it's because they're just up above their eyeballs in things. And they're not over their head. They're just above that. Think about micromanaging when you're going to get micromanaged, because all of you will end up that way at some point. It's not because we're trying to run you. We're trying to save you probably a little bit. We're trying to help you understand, keep you from drowning unnecessarily. We're trying to help you realize that all you need to do is keep swimming. All we're trying to do is to help you get another breath to keep going. And sometimes you can't do that any other way than to get involved and get a little messy with it. Throw you a little bit. Now, if somebody's clearly floundering and they don't have the energy to get going, yeah, you better believe that we're going to throw a heavy life preserver into you and try to save you. I'm going to probably dispatch Shelby to fix it. You know what I mean? Because that's what happens. But don't drown unnecessarily. That's what I would tell you. Don't let your pride think that you can go further than you can. Sometimes the right thing is to evaluate how far you can go. The best way to keep from being micromanaged is to understand what you can do before you get in the water. And then when you're in trouble, to have a plan to deal with how you're going to deal with your trouble. But sometimes that doesn't work, and somebody's got to come in the drink and save you. That's so much better than you drowning. The good thing for me after that is I was really resolved to learn how to swim. It was a scary moment. I mean, you can tell it's very vivid still in my brain. I'm not lying. I would have drowned. I was that close. And it made me even more determined to figure out how to swim and to do that. Now I'm a good swimmer. I was a lifeguard. I can swim, but I needed that little push to be able to save myself. And sometimes that's what you need with these crash and burn people. Sometimes it's that you've got to intervene. You've got to micromanage them. I mean, again, I think this is the most challenging thing to your success than out of everyone else. All the others, there's prescriptions for. This is the one that I think, again, there are ways to it, but there are some ethics involved in it. I mean, it could potentially hurt people. I mean, you could take the tact that you want to crash and burn your people. You want to send them out first. You could send your crash and burn people out first. Let them crash, let them burn, let them sit on the side until you get where you get everybody else going. Not the most terribly efficient way to move your group, but everybody would be together. Everybody would be together. No one would be too far ahead of you. Because when you crash and burn, you're not moving once you're done. I mean, you're just sitting there waiting for everybody to come. You know, I mean, I've seen people lead that way, especially when they have a whole bunch of them. It's just send them all up there, let them crash out, move everybody else up there to catch up, start again. And it can be very, very daunting as an RD to do that kind of leadership. It is not, because again, you know, people, you have to deal with the trauma of the crash, right? Now, I'm a big believer, again, most people don't like the crash. So it can be very motivating, but it can also be very debilitating. And so, you know, you may not have the space to let that person crash 3 or 4 times. You may have to say, we've tried it twice. Come back here and help me with these folks back here. Maybe their confidence gets a little better. And I hope at this point some of you have seen energy management. This is sort of plays right into some of that, right? Talking about energy management. The most intensive energy is these people. The most constant energy is these people. The 2 least are these 2 people. Sort of seems weird, right? But if you had nothing, if you could do nothing, let's say you could never get anybody to stop and go, this would be about as good as you could do. I mean, that would be almost as ideal as you could get if you couldn't get anybody to stop and go. If you could get everybody to put your feet down, what could you do there? You would ride behind everybody else, but you could still ride the bike. You could make a lot of ground up. You could move your group a lot. You know when this happens is when you get a returner staff of a bunch of, your whole staff's almost all returners, right? Is you get a staff like this. That's all of them are put your feet down. You still need some boundaries. They still need some guidance. They need attention, but they can go. And you will find that sometimes that is the best year you've ever had as an RD. It's hard to get this because everybody doesn't move at the same time. Everybody doesn't transition in the ways that you want them to become. You know, you're still left with one constant pressure person when the other 2 turn into babysitters or they turn into some of the other things, right? But the good news is that when most RAs start at the same place, they tend to go through the transitions similarly within a little bit of each other. Things that you should remember as an RD or just as a leader in general is that motivation is not a one-time sort of approach. It is a evolving approach that changes with the composition of the people that you're motivating and that you're leading. You know, what works today won't work from 3 months from now if people have moved, you know. So if you set out with the same order every time. So it does mean that there are moments when you have to stop. I'll tell you this story about this. And I used to love to read Tom Clancy, the writer, and I loved that period. I'm a child of the last bit of the Cold War, so it was still a thing. And I used to love reading his books about Soviet submarines and American submarines and just sort of all the things that are going on. And there's this thing that happened and it may still happen, I don't know. But Soviet submarines would do this thing, interesting maneuver. If American submarines were following them, they would just stop, turn around 180, and shoot off the radar. Now, if you're an American sub following that, it kind of freaks you out because the point was to make you give up your position, if you will. And it might cause you to activate your radar and tell them where you are. and that puts them in an advantage or whatever. But they called this maneuver, they called it the Crazy Ivan, where they would turn around 180 and look at back behind them and activate their radar, their sonar, it's just to see what's behind them. I think that's a good practice as a leader, right? Is to every once in a while do crazy Ivan, stop, turn around, do a 180, shoot your sonar back behind you, especially when you're leading people, to make sure you haven't left anybody behind, to make sure you're not being followed, to make sure you know what you missed maybe along the way, to see where you are before you decide to rush forward. Sometimes it's important to do a check to see what you've gone behind you. And so, when you're an organization and you're leading people, the idea of having places where you're going to stop and you're going to take accounting of where we are and what we're doing and how we're doing it is super critical. And not to forget that occasionally you need to look back. Some of the best things that we've ever done in terms of the training for RDs and other things have come from looking back at what we did and what that experience was and helping us be better. That's why we ask you to give us some evaluations about things that we know, so we can make some improvements, so we can see what we lost along the way, where we didn't pick people up well enough, maybe what concepts people didn't get. Part of what's made me change what we're doing this year, from my end at least, is one, I want to try some things differently because I think we need to evolve in the way we deliver some of our formats, and I want to encourage other people to think about that. COVID and the pandemic really showed me how vulnerable places can be to not having some of this stuff ready or capable of producing electronically and virtually. And it also told me that there was a richness that I was missing sometimes from my presentations that I wanted from people. Some of the conversation that we have by having you be engaged with the material before I come, so that we could have a deeper conversations about some of the things, and to really get at the things that you maybe wanted to explore more, or maybe didn't understand the same or weren't clear on, or maybe just they intrigued you. And so for me, that's been sort of why I've made a little bit of shift, is that I want to be able to have some of the conversations that we've had today and the other day, where we have some more of that sort of ability to look at that. Other thoughts or any questions anybody has about what we've been talking about now? Useful to you? Yeah, you have to say that. Yes, thank you. I hope, I know it's a lot weird. It's not would be my preference to stand up in front of people and do this all the time, but sometimes it's easier when you've got 8 and 9 people to do that. But also sometimes it's just, I've got your undivided attention in that way, and that's good, And so I really believe this is something that'll help you do your job better. I don't think it's something that, is going to help you on opening day necessarily, or maybe do a discipline conference, but I think as you're thinking about what you want to achieve this year, as you think about how you want to move your group and your people, how you want to motivate some people, or may need to motivate some people, I do believe that there is some truth to this in a way that allow you to be successful without having to figure it out on your own. And that's really, look, let's be honest, that's really the point of training. It's not to just take up hours and hours of your time, but it's to help you figure out that these are the steps that allow you to do this without you having to go and experience it. You're all smart people. Give you enough time and experience, you may come to the same conclusions about some of this that I have, maybe even a few that I haven't. But the time, I've been doing this for 26 years, and it's taken me a long time to figure some of it out. So why not benefit from that now? And that's the same thing for everybody else who's presenting, is they're trying to give you the benefit of that experience and knowledge so that you will be better at it quicker and sooner than some of us have been. So, it's just like, you always, the challenge when of old age is that you're not as good as what you were back when you were young, but you know all the things you didn't know when you were young. And so, that's the challenge of youth. So I know all kinds of things now that would have made me superstar back when I was younger, right? Or when I was doing this earlier. I've made plenty of the mistakes that you'll make. So, my hope is to help you avoid some of that. Some of you still have to experience it. There's always somebody. Whatever I said, you don't have to step on a hand grenade to know it's a hand grenade. You don't have to step on a pile of poop to know it's a pile of poop. But some people, like my brother, just have to step in it. Every one of them. Don't be like that if you can. So, all right. Thank you all. I appreciate you. I got to go do something else, I guess. So, thanks.